The dynamic between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White is very interesting because clearly it's a relationship with a basis of respect. I mean, when Stephanie White was hired, Clark was thrilled, super excited. And coach said all the right things about coming in and coaching the Fever and coaching Caitlin Clark. Then fairly early in the season, I would say there was a bit of a philosophical divide, but it never got to be completely worked out, right? And it wasn't as if they were at odds, but I noticed when they would talk about things, and for instance, when Caitlin Clark had come back from one of her injuries.
Okay, so get this. Caitlin Clark dropped some very cutting remarks live on national television, sending tremendous shockwaves through the entire league. She was discussing her position, particularly after returning from injury, and she confirmed what coach Stephanie White had told her. You're aware of the necessity to improve your screening abilities and play more off-ball. She nodded in agreement with those coaching points, but almost immediately, with an obvious, almost aggressive edge in her voice, she loudly and unequivocally reiterated her absolute certainty. She asserted unequivocally, "I'm at my best with the ball in my hands." This wasn't a casual statement of fact. What we heard was a clear, unmistakable challenge, a direct antithesis to the same coaching paradigm that her own head coach was actively promoting. The message was clear, broadcast for everyone to hear, and it immediately produced a palpable, obvious tension that threatened to derail their entire relationship before it even had a chance to begin. The deafening hush that followed her declaration revealed a vast, irrefutable intellectual division for the entire world to see.
And it wasn't as if they were at odds, but I noticed when they would talk about things, and for instance, when Caitlin Clark had come back from one of her injuries and Ari McDonald was there and they were asking about playing together, and Clark referenced some of the talking points Stephanie White has made, like being a better screener, about playing off ball, but then she, reiterated that she's at the best with the ball in her hands. And that reminded me of when I was there for the Liberty game, the first Liberty game that Clark got hurt in, not the one that she came back and exploded in. And before that game, there was a little bit of a hint of,
the initial hire of Stephanie White for the Fever was met with tremendous enthusiasm, particularly from Clark herself, who was reportedly overjoyed with the decision. White came in saying the right things, vowing to coach the Fever with passion and, most importantly, to truly embrace a superstar player. She sounded like the ideal fit. This is what's crazy. That honeymoon period was unexpectedly short-lived, ending early in the season. Almost before anyone could blink, a philosophical schism developed between the two. We're talking about a fundamental disagreement, a basic difference of opinion about how the team, and more especially Caitlin Clark, should ideally perform on the court. It was not an open feud. Not at first. But this unspoken, simmering hostility was plainly seething beneath the surface. A slight break in the fundamental base of their union, which keen followers, let me tell you, swiftly detected. The early regard was undeniable. It was undeniable. However, fissures appeared almost immediately, indicating that much deeper, more difficult issues were on the horizon.
Fans took that and turned it into Stephanie White will destroy Caitlin Clark and all that. We never got a chance to see them completely gel. When Clark had come back, even when she was playing hobbled before the groin injury that ultimately ended her season when the ankle injury compounded it, the Fever were rolling. They had won a couple of games in a row there, but not only just did they win them, they looked like a machine. And that was with Clark struggling to shoot because she was obviously hobbled with injuries. But then when the Fever go on and they win without Caitlin Clark, and clearly Stephanie White proves she's a hell of a coach, and the rest of the team steps up,
The first notable public manifestation of this increasing difference occurred when Clark, who was still recovering from an injury, was directly questioned about her role, particularly in relation to her teammate Erica Wheeler. She paid lip service. She provided the appropriate responses, acknowledging White's orders about playing off-ball and the significance of improving as a screener. But it was in that moment that the true Caitlin Clark, the fiercely competitive, self-assured player, surfaced. She reaffirmed her personal philosophy, claiming with steadfast certainty that her optimal performance, her very best, was when she had the ball firmly in her hands, driving the offense, directing the tempo, and serving as a principal orchestrator. This wasn't just a casual preference. It was a forceful, definitive statement about her identity as a player, clearly at odds with a particular team strategy that White was aggressively seeking to adopt. It felt less like an adaptation, less like a player taking on a new role, and more like a quiet but very public rejection of the path her coach had set for her.
Go on and they win without Caitlin Clark, and clearly Stephanie White proves she's a hell of a coach, and the rest of the team steps up. Clark celebrated in that moment, and I know for a fact that they have a good relationship, right? So it's just intriguing because they never got a chance to fully flesh out their on-court relationship. They have a great off-court relationship, and so much has been made of their relationship since without us having a chance to actually see the substance. And then when Stephanie White says anything, it gets run with, like when she had talked about how important Kelsey Mitchell was to the team. I don't even forget that.
And here's the interesting part. This public exchange, which we just discussed, recalled an earlier, perhaps more subtle confrontation that occurred prior to a critical game versus Liberty. White had once again emphasized the necessity of Clark playing off the ball, presenting it as a method to offer her a much-needed respite while also benefiting the team's general offensive flow. It sounded reasonable, right? Clark's reaction, while polite, yet had a faint undertone of resistance. She recognized the potential benefits. Sure, there was a brief reprieve and some aid for the squad, but she swiftly returned to her deeply held notion that she is at her best and most impactful when she is orchestrating the offensive with the ball firmly in her hands. At that moment, it was evident that this was more than just a tactical dispute or a disagreement over single play. No, this was a major collision of core basketball principles. A serious power struggle was clearly building beneath the surface, ready to boil over at any time.
And then when Stephanie White says anything, it gets run with, like when she had talked about how important Kelsey Mitchell was to the team. I don't even forget the exact comments, but it was the most innocent comment ever, especially when they're trying to re-sign Kelsey Mitchell in free agency. But it's like, well, she didn't say Caitlin Clark was the be-all, end-all of everything all the time, and therefore she, hates her. But regardless, Stephanie White was on with Sue Bird on her Bird's Eye View podcast and specifically talked about Caitlin Clark and said some things that I think fans will like to hear, especially coming from her.
How important was it to forge that relationship with her?
Naturally, fans and the media, as they often do, jumped on these nuanced conversations, blowing them up into a full-fledged dramatic tale of conflict. That philosophical split, the one we've been discussing, was soon sensationalized with articles claiming that Stephanie White was intentionally attempting to undermine Caitlin Clark's game. Or, worse, suppress her completely unique generational gift. The public perception of the squad quickly altered, from perceiving them as a cohesive one to seeing them as an organization plagued by severe internal conflict. Every tiny statement and subtle gesture from either side was rigorously examined under a microscope, adding to the already enormous strain on both the coach and her star player. The conspicuous lack of any clear public conclusion simply added fuel to the fire, transforming what may have been simple everyday arguments into perceived significant power struggles, all taking place in the unforgiving, hyper-scrutinized spotlight of national attention.
That I think fans will like to hear, especially coming from her.
How important was it to forge that relationship with her for all the reasons?
I mean, really important. I'd had just a little bit of a relationship with Caitlin from calling her games a number of times, when she was in college, but it was very important. Look, she's obviously the centerpiece of everything that we do. And most importantly for me was just connecting and building trust. I don't know how she does what she does and handles it so gracefully. I'm not sure, myself as a.
Stephanie White finally had her much anticipated opportunity to publicly address all the swirling conjecture when she appeared on Sue Bird's extremely popular Bird's Eye View program. And let me tell you, White did not give up for a second. This was her snap, her final answer. Not a yelling fight, not a heated disagreement, but a clear, unyielding, articulate statement of a coaching philosophy that squarely addressed all perceived insults and criticisms of her tactics. She emphasized the need of developing a deep, trusting relationship with Clark. Not only did she receive recognition as a superstar, but she was also viewed as a player who needed to be challenged and molded in order to fulfill her full potential. White's statements were a crystal-clear strategic response, a purposeful move to impose her authority and vision in the face of heavy public scrutiny, methodically laying out her uncompromising coaching principle for everyone to comprehend.
But I'm going to be honest, and I think that I certainly appreciate that about her. And I'm also the same kind of psycho that she is in terms of like competitiveness. Now it comes out in different ways, but we both just really want to win, and we want to set ourselves and our teammates up for success. And so it was really important for me, right away with her.
So a few important things I think that were said there. Number one was she's the centerpiece of everything that we do. So that will be received really well out there amongst CCFC. And it's right? Everybody knows that, both on the basketball court and from the...
On the same episode, White made another tremendously powerful statement, which appeared to contradict the brewing debate. She stated, and I quote, "She is obviously the centerpiece of everything that we do." This was a clear and irrefutable recognition of Clarke's great importance. Not only does she have tremendous skills on the court, but she also has a massive impact as the league's unrivaled commercial engine. However, and this is where things become very fascinating, a seemingly conciliatory remark was immediately followed by a solid core coaching principle, which he stated with complete conviction. White continued, "I really believe that you must coach and challenge your greatest players." This, my friends, was neither a retreat nor a concession. It was a powerful statement. White stated plainly that Clarke's role as the indisputable centerpiece did not free her from hard coaching. In fact, White contended that the very status required it, establishing a clear boundary and obvious expectation for what it genuinely means to lead a team, particularly one with generational potential at its core.
For a little bit, because she had a little bit of that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant DNA in her. And that's a great combination. So it's exciting to see how it goes going forward, because they didn't have a chance. They like each other. They trust each other. They're both great at what they do. So it's hard to see it not working out. And Caitlin, seeing what the team was able to do without her, that's got to be helpful in a certain sense to know what they're capable of. And then them knowing what they're capable of without her, and then knowing what she is capable of.
White did not mince words when explaining her coaching method. She came straight out and identified herself as a very honest, highly open coach, implying directness in her communication that, while it may occasionally ruffle some feathers, she believes is absolutely necessary for developing genuine trust within a team. This was not simply a suggestion. It was, she insisted, a non-negotiable expectation for all of her players, and especially for her star. Her message was very obvious. There would be no guessing games or secret intentions. If a player had any questions, they were supposed to ask them directly. This unshakable dedication to ruthless honesty, which he considered as a foundation of her leadership, was an unequivocal response to any perceived threats to her authority, a call for a similarly direct and forthright reaction from her entire team. Perhaps the most illuminating moment from White, the one that truly cut through all the commotion, was a frank, almost stunning admission, "I'm the same type of lunatic that she is in terms of competitiveness." This was clearly not a casual comment. It was a frontal challenge, an urgent proclamation of equality in the never-ending pursuit of victory. While their individual competing impulses may appear to be different on the surface, White was essentially reminding the entire world, and hence Clarke herself, that she possessed the same savage, unrelenting determination to win. This powerful statement put them both on an equal playing field of intense ambition, implying that any perceived conflict was a natural byproduct of two elite psycho-competitors clashing over what they each believed was the absolute best path to success. Despite all of these public debates and philosophical assertions, White and Clarke's on-court connection was never able to fully flourish. Clarke suffered catastrophic injuries. First came a persistent ankle issue, followed by a heartbreaking, season-ending groin injury that prevented them from ever properly gelling or finding their groove on the floor. The tantalizing idea of seeing their separate philosophies blend, of witnessing White's vision and Clarke's genius actually join, was completely untapped, leaving behind a recurring, agonizing what if that further heightened the tension around their public comments. The lack of a genuine encounter conclusion simply made those intellectual jabs and perceived insults appear more profound and substantial, prompting unending debate about their eventual compatibility. And you know what? Clarke has a reputation of subtly defying coaching limits. Consider how, early in her career, she famously compared her long, outrageous shots at Iowa to Steph Curry's, claiming with total conviction that you don't tell Steph Curry not to shoot. This mindset displays a deep-seated conviction in her own unique genius, as well as an innate, almost intuitive aversion to being pigeonholed or constrained by typical coaching guidelines. This previous, almost fun insult to established basketball knowledge exactly predicted her reaction to White's instructions, establishing a clear pattern of a player who, above all, trusts her own intuition and exceptional talent. It demonstrated unequivocally that she was no stranger to standing firm, even against conventional basketball knowledge, when she believed in her own strategy. White's teaching philosophy, on the other hand, was purposefully focused on specific areas for Clark's development, areas that directly oppose her preferred ball-dominant style. The coach explicitly targeted considerable improvement in Clark's off-ball play, pushing her to become a much stronger catch-and-shoot threat and, more importantly, to understand when to hand over possession of the ball to her teammates. Let me be clear, these were not modest tweaks or subtle alterations. These were important developments that required Clark to move beyond her long-standing ball-dominant identity. White's constant insistence on these issues was a sharp snap, an inflexible desire for improvement that indirectly countered Clark's earlier remarks about knowing her own best play. It was a direct strategic countermove that marked a significant shift in their dynamic. Another modest but immensely effective snap from White occurred when the Fever began to win without Caitlin Clark. Despite Clark's hobbling or, at times, complete absence from the court, the squad came to resemble a well-oiled machine, stringing together numerous spectacular victories in succession. This era unambiguously demonstrated White's coaching prowess, ability to lead and adapt, and the unexpected depth of the team she was methodically assembling. It was a powerful, incontrovertible indication that her system, her coaching technique, could thrive even when its brightest, most anticipated star was not performing at full potential. This achievement, while definitely lauded by Clark, also served as a quiet but powerful affirmation of White's strategic approach, demonstrating the enormous potential for collective strength within the Fever team. Another noteworthy aspect of Clark's stubborn personality is her famed competitive drive, which has been compared to the iconic Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant DNA. Even her Iowa coaches, Lisa Bluder and Jan Jensen, have spoken candidly about how difficult it is to communicate with Emma because of a passionate, often stubborn competitive spirit. This underlying psycho-competitiveness, which White readily associated with, clearly explains why Clark may disrespect or oppose coaching orders that she regards as impeding her route to triumph. It is not about malice or contempt. It's about extraordinary, even unmatched self-belief, steeped in the same unrelenting winning obsession that drives true sports legends. Even seemingly simple remarks from White were magnified and twisted into perceived slights against Clark in this carefully monitored setting, adding enormous, almost intolerable pressure to an already complex relationship. For example, White's comments on Kelsey Mitchell's critical importance during efforts to resign the veteran player were misinterpreted by some fans as implying that Clark wasn't the team's ultimate be-all and end-all. This entire story exemplifies a carefully monitored climate in which practically any statement made by White may be read, often incorrectly, as a covert insult to Clark or a purposeful undermining of her invaluable function. It genuinely forced White to traverse an incredible minefield of public opinion, where every single word she said had disproportionate weight, exacerbating an already fragile relationship. Despite all of their philosophical disagreements and perceived insults, a critical underlying aspect of trust definitely developed between them. Think about it. During the Fever's amazing run, Clark herself posted a truly supportive comment regarding Stephanie White, while being sidelined due to injury. This public gesture, which appeared out of character considering the previous tensions and public friction, clearly revealed that, under the surface of tactical disputes, a true personal trust had begun to emerge. This bond, White argued, was critical, noting that gaining Clark's trust was absolutely necessary before she could effectively push her as a coach. It suggested a deeper understanding, a mutual respect that existed despite the intense public drama. White's coaching performance this season, particularly her astonishing ability to handle Clark's difficult ailments and the team's eventual victory, was nothing short of extraordinary. To unite a team in such terrible circumstances and then take them to a great finish demonstrated her unwavering leadership and acute strategic insight. This outstanding coaching performance served as a tremendous confirmation of her techniques, demonstrating her ability to establish a winning culture and sustain team cohesion even when her top player was benched or openly questioned her approach. It was a silent yet deep rebuke to any doubters who questioned her ability to lead such a high-profile club. The ultimate difficulty for White wasn't only guiding a generational talent like Clark. It was more about properly integrating her into a system that allowed her to not only thrive individually but also elevate those around her. White's persistent emphasis on Clark learning to trust her teammates more and, more importantly, learning to see control at critical moments was a direct contrast to Clark's strongly entrenched ball-in-her-hands mindset. This was not, to be clear, an insult to Clark's exceptional abilities. It was a deliberate snap intended to promote more comprehensive collaborative team play. It took Clark to realize that her dynamism, her distinctive genius, could be kept and even magnified by adopting a more balanced approach, ultimately making her an even more formidable weapon inside a really united team. The potential for a dynasty is evident, even after a heartbreaking loss to the Aces. But it all depends on how White and Clark eventually reconcile their opposing ideologies. The team's surprise success without Clark, combined with Clark's evident individual genius, produces an enthralling dynamic. They are both well aware of Caitlin Clark, a once-in-a-generation talent. The underlying concern is whether White's rigorous coaching demands for progress can fully mesh with Clark's intense self-belief and instinctive desire to control the game. It's a high-stakes chess battle in which every single move, word spoken, snap, and perceived insult determines the eventual course of this greatly anticipated future. The stage is set for an epic unsolved drama between two ferociously competitive psychos who, despite their public snaps and subtle insults, share deep mutual respect and a single overarching goal: to win the championship. They really like each other. They have a high level of trust in one another and are both outstanding at their jobs. However, the question of whether Clark's insatiable need for the ball and White's unwavering attitude of challenging her top players can actually converge into a perfect championship-winning symphony remains the sport's most interesting unresolved riddle. The tension is palpable, the stakes are high, and the future offers either the birth of a famous dynasty or continuing, enthralling battle of giants.